Folks, I'm showing 2 o'clock. This is Tim Wiedrich from the North Dakota Department of Health Resources and Response Section, and this is the statewide hospital operations briefing. This is for Monday. We'll also do Wednesday and Friday of this week. Let me remind you to make sure that your microphones are on mute unless you're actually speaking, and so that is very helpful. If you don't mute your microphone, we'll be forced to basically end your audio so that it doesn't disrupt the rest of the conversation. I would like to check in with Tim Blazels and see if Tim has any opening remarks from the Hospital Association. Tim? I'm not hearing any. We'll go ahead and proceed with the conversation for today. Well, I think the big news is that we did enter into a distribution process for some additional nursing staffing, and I want to have a conversation with you about what that actually is looking like. So let me take a moment and bring up my screen. That, interestingly enough, is not what I want to present, so let me try and change that to this. There we go. So, going back to the beginning of this emergency, we began taking on, Aaron, I think that you may not be muted. Going back to the beginning of this, no problem. We had begun to build staff within the State Health Department Emergency Operations Center, and we refer to that as a COVID response team. And we've built that staff primarily from Medical Reserve Corps volunteers that were able to come to work for us and to participate in that response. And then we also now are augmenting that staffing through 2 other sources. One is a contract labor source called Eminent Consulting, and we put in a request for 60 nurses from that source. And then the other is the Department of Defense. That was through a FEMA request, and the Air Force has been tasked with providing us with nurses from that source, and we had requested 60 from that source. So this weekend, staff began arriving from those 2 sources, and combined with the 69 full-time nursing staff that the health department has temporarily hired, makes up what our current labor pool is for what I'm calling phase 1. So let me talk a little bit more detail about the way those staff are currently deployed and that we believe in phase 1 will be deployed. You can see that we have several categories on the left-hand side. We have ICU hospitals, and so those are our ICU nursing staff that predominantly will be going to, if not exclusively, to the PPS hospitals or the tertiary care centers in the 4 largest cities. In addition to that, we have Med-Surg Hospital, and those are exactly what it sounds like. Those staff will be distributed, at least in this first set, primarily to the tertiary care centers as well, but also some support for critical access hospitals. We have long-term care nurses that are being deployed, and that is a source that we've been primarily supporting through the health department staff. Now remember, in this graph, I'm talking about just full-time nursing, in addition to the 39 that we're showing for long-term care from our state health department temporary staff. We have about an additional 99 part-time nurses that are part of that pool as well. And so from those 2 sources are what we have been principally supporting the long-term care requests that have been coming in. And then the last category is testing. So things like doing swab collections at the various test sites. We've been supporting with about 30 of our nurses within the state health department for those missions. And so between what we have previously had in the state health department, which are 69 full-time nurses, and the 60 that we requested from Eminent and the 60 that we requested from the Department of Defense, that will involve some minor modifications. You can see that we have 51 listed from the Department of Defense, and that's where we believe that we're standing right now with our request of 60. But by Wednesday, we believe that we'll have everyone in from Eminent, everyone in from the Department of Defense, and will take us to the number of 210. And so by looking at this graph, you can see how we've deployed those resources and intend to deploy the resources, building additional bed capacity within the tertiary care centers to go beyond where they were at the beginning of the COVID response, and frankly beyond where they've already expanded to, and substantial expansion has occurred within the PPS hospitals or the tertiary care centers so far, but that we're attempting to create additional expansion there as well, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. And then the same holding true for critical access hospitals, so that where there can be additional expansion of bed capacity within those facilities to be able to provide additional support to those facilities as well. Obviously, long-term care has been getting hit very hard with outbreaks, and as those outbreaks occur, it furloughs staff. As they have to furlough staff, we then are supplementing those facilities to keep them operational and keep those facilities open. And we have been attempting to reduce the number of nursing staff that are associated with testing events, and we're continuing to attempt to push that number lower and lower and lower, so that we have very few nursing staff actually engaged in that activity, but instead assigned to direct patient care or resident care instead. So that's the layout of the land as it currently exists. As I said, we began receiving nursing staff in this weekend, and we've put them through an orientation, and we began doing the distribution today to those facilities that are receiving those nurses. We last night gave phone calls to the long-term care facilities, and this was probably about 9 o'clock at night or so by the time we had all the allocations done, and we had a good handle based on some of the flight delays and so forth as to who was actually coming in. So those allocations happened about 9 o'clock, and we made phone calls to the long-term care facilities and also the tertiary care centers to advise them what we were distributing today. And what we have right now is approximately 45 of the Eminent nurses that have arrived in state and have been distributed or are being distributed, and about 36 of the Department of Defense nurses are physically here. So we're expecting over the next 2 days, on Tuesday and Wednesday, to continue to receive those nurses from that original order and continue to do those distributions. So by Wednesday, we think that we'll have the vast majority of what's coming in actually distributed, and we'll be able to move forward from there. Now, it's our intent to place an order, a request for an additional 140 nurses. And so that will be phase 2 of this operation. And I'll have more information about that as that unfolds, as we kind of formulate that in a stronger plan that I can start to talk about when those arrival times may be occurring and give you more information about that. So I'm anticipating by Wednesday I'll have a pretty good idea of how that will lay out and be able to provide quite a bit more information to you about that. So that's where we're at currently, and I think that this quantity of nurses should have a pretty substantial impact on our operations, both in long-term care and within the hospital settings, and we're looking forward to potentially even increasing this by another 140 in the not too distant future. Let's go ahead and turn our attention now to the vaccine status and storage. And for that, Miranda Baumgartner from Disease Control will join us. Miranda?
Thanks, Tim. Just trying to share my screen here.
You should be able to now.
And can you see my presentation there?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. And so we do have a couple different vaccines that we're looking at right now. Pfizer, which is our vaccine, has always been our vaccine A, that ultra cold storage of a -70, which now can be stored in that shipping container. What they have done with that shipping container, dry ice must be replenished within 24 hours and every 5 days thereafter of receiving that shipping container. Excuse me. That container can only be opened twice per day, and it is a fairly heavy container. It's going to weigh about 70 to 80 pounds. With this container also, since they do want all vaccine to be monitored temperature-wise, once that shipper is received, you are able to turn off that data logger and then reactivate it. That lets the company know that the vaccine has been delivered here, but then it also does give a temperature monitoring device so we know the temperature of that current unit. Otherwise, you can transport it into an ultra cold freezer at the facility, or it can be placed in the refrigerator. That vaccine is refrigerator stable for 5 days. This one does come in minimum dose increments of 1,000. So we are going to prioritize our warehouse as well for shipments to be sent so that we are able to send it out in smaller doses or smaller increments as well too. This one is 2 doses, 21 days apart, and it does require mixing on site. Once the vaccine has been mixed, you do have 6 hours to use that vaccine before it is considered needing to be wasted. With this vaccine here, it has been shown to be 95% effective beginning 28 days after that first dose. We do have 170 confirmed cases of COVID in here. In this test group here, 162 of those were observed in the placebo group. And so, like I said, it's about a 95% effective rate with this one here. This vaccine was submitted for an EUA on November 20th, so last week, Friday. Initial planning assumptions for North Dakota, we may receive up to about 23,000 doses initially, and then each week after that will vary a little bit. And the assumption is hopefully here, sometime in the very near future, we should have this vaccine. We do have a little bit of information here. This just kind of walks you through the different kind of storage for this and thawing. So when you look at this here, it takes about 30 minutes before at room temperature before you can, to 2 hours before you can dilute this here. And like I said, after that, you do have 6 hours at refrigerator temperatures to use this vaccine. Otherwise, if you do thaw it, it cannot be refrozen and it does need to be stored in the refrigerator for up to 5 days. This just kind of shows exactly how long breaking it down as to how long the vaccine is viable for. If you do put it in the ultra cold freezers right away, you do have up to 6 months to use this vaccine. Breaking it down a little bit more, kind of showing how the difference can be used. So a large center can use 1 tray, which is 975 doses, and it kind of breaks it down by each individual area as to who could use all those and expect how many throughput can be used to use all that vaccine that's there. And then we do have the Moderna vaccine. This is a frozen vaccine, again, at a -25 to a -15 degrees Celsius for 6 months. This one, however, they did submit for FDA approval to have this one stable in the refrigerator for 30 days. Again, you cannot refreeze this vaccine as well. The minimum ordering dose for this one is 100 dose increments. This vaccine is 2 doses, again, 28 days apart. The nice thing with this one is there is no diluent or on-site mixing with this one. It is just the vial of vaccine. Moderna does plan to submit for an EUA not long after Pfizer, so hopefully here very shortly they should be submitting. Our initial planning assumptions for North Dakota is we may receive is 15,500 doses of this vaccine again, and that's going to be our first initial. And then after that weekly, we should receive smaller increments. With this one here, you can see that this one is also 94.5% effective. And so hopefully we should have a fair amount with both of these vaccines, and they should be fairly stable in both fridge and freezer to have these vaccines on hand.
All right, thank you very much. And we'll be coming back, Miranda, at the end of these discussions for questions and answers and comments. So thank you for that. Let's go ahead and turn our attention now to the VP3 team. That's Roseanne Schmidt, Seth Fisher, and Jan Kamphaus, and see if you have any comments.
Hi, it's Tim. This is Roseanne reporting for the three of us. And I think since the last time we met, just a couple of things. We continue to do our daily huddles with the big six hospitals, and really with the intent of understanding where the capacity is and where the push points are with capacity. And ICU is always kind of the common denominator in capacity, and it varies by a case-by-case basis. So we continue to work with the hospitals in, trying to understand where the capacity is, number one, trying to understand where we can, open up some additional beds or capacity, whether it be ICU or just general med surg for COVID. And then thirdly, the other discussion that is occurring is how to, and I'm going to use this term loosely, how to do a one call for the critical access hospitals in transferring, because we know that you guys spend a whole lot of time making calls to the hospitals to try and find a place for your patient. And many times it's multiple calls and it's a lot of time. So we're going to see if we have a few more discussions to take place, but I'm hoping that there is going to be a solution for that might help, at least on a high level anyway, to make it a little bit easier on the cause in our state. And that's all I have, Tim.
Thanks, Roseanne. Well, normally we do a survey process while we're doing the hospital rounds. We had a bit of a technical issue, and so we may not have that available. Let me just check in with Ryan Dreyer today and see if we do in fact have that available. And if we do, it will appear here shortly. And if we don't, it won't. And so go ahead, Ryan.
Tim, yes, we're ready to go with that. So I'll bring that up here shortly.
Okay, you can go ahead and post it anytime you're ready. So with that, let's do the usual practice of starting over to the Fargo area and see what comments or questions you may have. Be particularly interested in knowing if you have any specific problems that you're running into that you want to bring to our attention. So any comments or questions from the Fargo area? And Ryan, you can go ahead and advance that to the next one. There we go. Not hearing any comments or questions from the Fargo area. Let's head over to the Jamestown area.
Hey, this is Dane at Jamestown Regional Medical Center, and I was just wondering if the slides would be available from that vaccine presentation that we just had.
Miranda, can you make those slides available?
I sure can.
Great.
Awesome, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Any other questions or comments from the Jamestown area? Now to the Bismarck area. Not hearing any from the Bismarck area other than an incoming phone call. Let's head over to the Dickinson area. All right, we'll head over to the Williston area now. Nothing from the Williston area, now the Minot area. Let's check in with the Devil's Lake area. And finally, the Grand Forks area. All right, before we begin to close out for today, obviously we have completed the rounds before we got through the slides. So I'm going to just keep things open until we reach the last slide. But I did want to comment back on the staffing that for those facilities that are receiving eminent staff, that and we go through this at the time that we're making the staff assignments. We reach out to your facility, we'll have a phone conversation with you, but the eminent staff is not in a position to drive, so we'll get them the staffing to excuse me, your community, but once they're in your community, there needs to be arrangements made. That has not been a problem, at least to this point. There have either been hospital or long-term care staff that are willing to pick up and drop off the nurses from within that community to the facility, or volunteers have indicated willingness to transport them back and forth as well. But just want to give you a heads up about that. And let me see if anybody else has anything else to say before we close out today's program. One other comment, you are intending that while we're doing these briefings, these 3 times a week briefings, that we won't be running the statewide tactical team meetings any longer. So once a month we were coming together as hospitals, but we really don't see a need to do that given the fact that we're, at least during this higher operating period, meeting 3 times a week. So,
Tim, this is Julie. Can you hear me?
Go ahead, Julie.
So just very quickly, the schedule for the remainder of the week with regards to the holiday, can you provide some more information on that?
So we are meeting on Wednesday, and then frankly, we were going to kind of poll to see if we could not meet on Friday and see what kind of the will of the group is. If I could kind of take that poll now, would there be any concern, unless something extraordinary is occurring, about us not meeting on Friday? If anybody feels strongly that we need to meet on Friday, I know that there are a number of folks that have expressed their interest in taking that day off, but we would be in a position to go ahead and hold the meeting if there's a desire to do that. All right, well, for now, let's consider that a possibility. We won't make that final decision until Wednesday when we see where our operating tempo is on Wednesday. Thank you for that, Julie. All right,
Tim,
well, I think we have exhausted.
I see we have one hand raised.
Go ahead.
Al, did you have a question? I see your hand is raised.
I think that was Clint. Thanks, Clint. This is Al Dorman. The one thing I wanted to pop on for today, I'm normally not part of these meetings, but I was told that, or I heard that critical access hospitals and clinics were looking to start using the Binex Now test. I don't know if that's been covered before. I know in talking with Tim and Julie and their group that there is a process in place for ordering and reporting those out. But I just came to the meeting today to let you know that we may be getting a lot of those tests into the state from the review that's been done by the Department of Health. I'm told that the effectiveness of that test on symptomatic patients is quite high, like close to 100%. Asymptomatic, not so much. But it's a tool where you can get results in 15 minutes. So I know I'm probably telling you stuff you already know, but I know yesterday or over the weekend when the governor announced that we were going to do some in our K-12 school districts for faculty and staff, that we did get some feedback that critical access hospitals and clinics thought that we should go there first with this test. But I think right now, and Julie would know, have enough on hand where we could start getting these out more widely across the state. And we are working on a plan with the CDC. If we have strategies that the CDC endorses, that we could see a lot of these tests coming into the state of North Dakota. There's some strong thoughts and opinions on Binax now and their effectiveness, but we've talked with the scientists at Abbott. We've talked to our own experts in the state, like Dr. Wynn and Dr. Carson and others, Dr. Connell. I think the evidence has shown us so far that on symptomatic patients that they are quite effective, especially when you consider you can get a result in 15 minutes and quickly isolate that person. So I always tell everyone I'm not a salesman for Abbott, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that this resource was available. I think it could be very useful in your facilities. And maybe this has already been covered in these meetings. How do you order and all that? But I just came here today to A, make sure that was in place, and B, encourage you to look at this as part of your strategy to identify COVID. So I'll stop there, and I don't know, Julie or Tim, if you have any comments on what's already taken place that I've missed. And if you've all heard this before, my apologies.
Absolutely not, and there's no need to apologize. It's an excellent topic to raise. I know that we have had conversations relative to Binax now, actually, quite some time ago, and that is an ongoing conversation. There are a number of the critical access hospitals that are, in fact, interested in it. I think it would do us really well to recap that on Wednesday's meeting. If you'll recall, we had a number of previous presentations, and not that we'll go in through any tremendous depth, but just to make sure that everybody's aware of the protocol, the recommendations about utilization of the test. And one of the issues I know that particularly in the hospital setting that's come up is relative to CLIA waivers. And obviously your laboratories already have CLIA waivers in place. So there's more of a technical conversation that each of your hospitals needs to have about whether you want to add the Binax now onto the existing waiver, or you want to obtain a separate one for that. Either way, it's pretty easily covered. It's not any type of an obstacle. It's just a kind of a paperwork thing, and so you'll just need to make a decision along those lines. But the efficacy of doing this and the way forward, I think, has been pretty well explained. And I think Wednesday, again, I know I'm being redundant, but we'll need to come back and I think do a recap of it.
Tim, that sounds good. I just want to make sure everyone knew it was available. And I just know from my own personal experience, I got a son in Fargo that was symptomatic. He went to his healthcare provider. I won't say which one, but it took over a week to get results. Just from that standpoint, and I know our labs are running behind, and we apologize for that if that's impacting your operations. But when we talk to our out-of-state lab, and I don't know if any of you have samples going there, but they are just swamped because of the prevalence across the United States. So again, we're looking at this as an opportunity to more quickly identify and isolate, especially those that are most likely to spread it. So I appreciate that, Tim. And if you wouldn't mind, if I'm available, I'll dial in on Wednesday too. I'd like to listen.
Yep, that would be terrific. And let me just see if anybody has any comments or questions right now. All right. Well, hearing none, we will be back on track for Wednesday and pick up Binex and the staffing issues and any other issues that are relevant at that time. Thanks, everybody.